First, though, we're going to have to pick over the bones of Thursday's local and mayoral elections and the Runcorn by-election upset for Labour. Great show of support for reform. The relatively new kids on the block, of course, hardly get any publicity in the media. But I'm not sure anyone was particularly shocked or surprised by the overall results. Neither Labour nor the Tories seem to hold much hope of your support in the run-up to polling day. No Keir Starmer visit to Runcorn to drum up support for their candidate, who, perhaps taking a leaf from the Labour front bench, attempted to sound more right-wing than her rival, Sarah Pochin, now Reform's newest MP. OK, so having the previous Labour MP punch a local voter ain't going to do wonders for the party's majority, but Reform still managed to overturn one of Labour's biggest. No wonder Labour backbenchers are getting increasingly twitchy and ever so slightly more vocal about their concerns over Starmer's style of leadership, the party's direction of travel. But the MPs quoted in the papers are still bravely doing so anonymously, so their frustration, I would judge, is far from boiling over. Complacency was the word used in The Guardian's headline yesterday, while the paper's star columnist Marina Hyde reflected on Labour's inability, and the Tories to some degree, to deliver the change people want. And it's not for me to put words into your mouths. Call me direct, 0345 6060 973, but axing pensioners' winter fuel allowance, just as you're seeing taking expensive freebies, wasn't the ideal start I think many Labour supporters have been dreaming of after 14 years of Tory rule. So how's PM Keir Starmer responded to all of this? His first by-election loss in government, a bloody nose at the local elections. Has the penny finally dropped that going after pensioners, the disabled and small businesses, to name but three Labour targets, that won't win votes?
Well, we promised change at the last election, and we're getting on and delivering that change.
I'm sorry. You've just tanked in the locals. You lost one of your biggest majorities, and it's business as usual. The promises you made at the last election, or rather what you've done in office since then, they don't seem to be resonating with voters, Keir. So Keir Starmer says he gets why people didn't vote Labour, right? And then he says, essentially, he's not going to do anything to change that. He doesn't seem willing, to nick his word, he doesn't seem willing to change. He talks about change, but he's not going to change either his or the government's thinking, it seems. Now, I do have some sympathy for Starmer, even if it doesn't sound like it, because Labour, like the Tories, are trapped. They're faced by the threat posed by the bloke who talked this country into Brexit, the biggest self-inflicted financial disaster of the modern age. Both the two main parties have been drifting rightwards to address the problem posed by this man. Neither sound as convincing as the hard-right populism spouted by Farage, and so Labour and the Tories failed to win back any reform voters while simultaneously losing centre-left voters to the Lib Dems and the Greens. It is, to my simple thinking, a lose-lose approach, a lose-lose strategy. We all know what the Tories are going to do, of course, don't we? I mean, they'll do what they always do these days, and that's sack their leader wherever she's been hiding, and then they'll vote for a new one, a practice that's seen the party looking increasingly swivel-eyed, to borrow a phrase. I think it was Fraser Nelson who said the other day that the Tories are just one leadership election away from oblivion. But it's Labour that's the party of government these days. How should they respond to Thursday's results? Should they return to their roots, champion the working man, the working woman once again, care for the disabled and the vulnerable, tax the rich? Or does all that sound too, I don't know, too Jeremy Corbyn for a party still recoiling from that arguably much more bruising electoral blow? I really am, I'm completely flummoxed as to why Keir Starmer's response to the drubbing he received on Thursday is more of the same. I just don't get it. In fact, the last caller to Henry's show said, if Labour do 4 more years of this, they're going to be annihilated at the next general election. I'm going to be talking to a couple of Labour-minded people. First to Richard Burgon, Labour MP for Leeds East, Secretary of the Socialist Campaign Group of Labour MPs as well. Morning, Richard. Nice to see you.
How are you?
I'm genuinely flummoxed. I haven't really understood the direction of travel Labour's been on since July. I don't think much of the country has followed it. I think you now have the evidence on Thursday, and the leadership's response is to plough on.
Well, the thing that flummoxes me and is flummoxing a lot of people is this idea that we need to just go further and faster, because what we need isn't a pick up in pace by the government. What we need is a change in direction, not a change in speed. Because in Runcorn on Thursday and elsewhere, time and time again, decisions people didn't expect from our government, cutting the winter fuel allowance, the proposed cuts to disability benefits, those are the kinds of issues that have been coming up, and people have been scratching their head and thinking, why would a Labour government do this? And so if we're not careful, if we don't have a change of direction, we're going to end up with the Labour government paving the way for a reform government or a reform Conservative coalition government after the next general election. And that would have devastating consequences to the people our party exists to represent.
You've tried going leftwards with Jeremy Corbyn, some are very appealing to younger voters. Now you're on a more sort of a rightwards direction. Where should the Labour Party be? I mean,
has always meant to be a broad church. And I think what people want to see from the Labour Party is a party that delivers change after 14 years of Conservative austerity. And the cut to the winter fuel payment, which I voted against, has gone down really badly with people. It's made people think, you know what? We weren't expecting this, and this doesn't feel like the government's on our side. And then the most urgent thing I think the government needs to do to show that it's listened is to drop the proposed cuts to disability benefits. That affects people in a lot of the so-called red wall areas. It's going to affect millions of people across the country. And look, people have had a hard time in the last 14 years, and what they want is real change from a Labour government. And I think the answer from the leadership of the party so far has been to kind of chase some of the reform vote, which I don't think is accessible to us. And actually, we've ended up breaking up our own progressive voter coalition. So I do think we need to be clear as a party that unless there's a change of direction from the party to deliver in the way that people want, then we are risking genuinely having what I would consider to be a far-right government in this country after the next general election. That's something, obviously, that the Labour Party can't countenance.
I should acknowledge for the listeners, as I said in my introduction, that most of the criticism from Labour backbenchers in the newspapers has been done anonymously, and I really respect you for putting your head above the parapet.
Well, no problem at all, because to me, it's really urgent. I look around my constituency in Leeds East, which has got some of the most economically deprived areas in the country in it. And I fought hard to get Labour government. We need Labour government. We need that Labour government to deliver. And that's why things like the winter fuel payment cut, things like the proposed cut to disability benefit, those aren't Labour approaches, and they need to change. We look at the election in Runcorn. You know, we had a 15,000 majority there. It was swept away, and it's not good enough to say, oh, we only lost by 6 votes. You know, that's a seat we should never lose, whatever the circumstances of the by-election. And you look, the Greens nearly got 2,000 votes there, and we lost by 6 votes. It seems to me to be pretty obvious that we should, rather than chasing after some of the reform voters who haven't voted Labour, the surveys show, for at least 20 years, we should be chasing some of those people and making an offer so that if we'd have just got a few of those nearly 2,000 Green voters in the Runcorn by-election, we'd have won this by-election quite easily. But some of the policies we've been pursuing, like the winter fuel payment, like the proposed disability benefit cuts, they've been really alienating Labour people. And you can't afford to alienate your own base.
Richard?
The general election results, it was fantastic to get such a big majority, but it wasn't a skyscraper, it was a sandcastle. And my fear is that majority could easily be washed away. And so we shouldn't feel cocky or too sure of ourselves, despite the big majority at the next general election. The Tories had a huge majority in 2019. That got swept away. We've got to make sure that doesn't happen to us. But the idea of just ploughing on further and faster, that doesn't sound like we've listened. And all governments need to listen, and the Labour leadership needs to listen and change.
I'll tell you what, Richard, I'm very impressed by what you're saying, because this is the kind of language I expected to be coming from Labour's front bench. Really nice talking to you, Richard Burgon, their Labour MP for Leeds East. Let's bring in Stella Chadakidu, a former Labour Party advisor. Good morning to you, Stella.
Good morning.
There didn't appear to be much mea culpa from Keir Starmer. the language Marina Hyde highlighted, and it's something we've talked about on this show before, is the ability to connect with the public, the messaging, it all seems wrong. And yet the response to that drubbing in the council elections is more of the same.
Hey, Keir Starmer is not a populist leader, right?
No.
This was never meant to be his strength. So we already knew that. This is nothing new. The reason why people voted him in is because they were hoping to have a government that's going to be more stable and that's going to be more secure, because they felt that the last 15 years have been complete chaos. Now, the problem with what Keir Starmer is trying to do, and I have a lot of sympathy, because remember, he's been there for less than a year after 15 years of a completely different party leading the country. But the problem is, he was talking about Ukraine, for example. He was trying to highlight topics where he thinks reform voters agree with him more than they agree with Nigel Farage. But this is still the strategy of trying to out Farage.
Yes.
Which is the same as Kemi Badenoch. What he's trying to do with talking about trans rights and all of that, most of the average public do not care. And this is why reform is doing so well right now. You have local council elections. So even if you're just talking about immigration, which obviously they are, but they're also talking about, oh, we're going to cut council budgets. We are going to lower your council tax. We are going to do what Elon Musk is doing with Doge. Even if this is pretty much impossible, especially in the councils that reform has won, because what you have there is decimated budgets, the vast majority of which are going into social care. So unless Nigel Farage is going to change the demographics overnight somehow, which I doubt he will be able to do, then it's highly unlikely they will be able to reduce the budgets. But for the average voter listening to these three different policy issues, for them, the one that's closer to the real life experience on day to day, it's what Nigel Farage is talking about, because they know how much they're paying in council taxes, and they know what they think about immigration. If they're living in an area with an asylum hotel, for example, or something like that, then they already have strong feelings about it.
So how does Labour respond? You see, because talking about change is very different from actually changing.
100%. And it takes a lot of time, right? It takes time to see results. But this is not a very good excuse, because the Labour is in government. There are actually a lot of things that they can do. But they need to change the framing. They need to stop talking about things that Nigel Farage and reform candidates sound good at. Because reform candidates can speak about immigration, but talk to them about any other policy issues and how many of them can actually authoritatively spark confidence in the average voter. Talk to them about the economy. Actually talk to them about what they're going to change. And now that they have all of these councillors elected and they have taken all of these new councils, then make sure you scrutinize them. How exactly are you going to be cutting the council budgets?
I think that what you're saying is that reform actually haven't been tested yet in any form of government, and now they're going to be, and they will have to live up to their promises. Stella, Richard, pleasure talking to you both this morning.